I'm Chelsea. A few weeks ago, my father passed away after a long illness. I regret that he never got to meet his grandchildren. I remember promising him at my wedding 5 years ago that I would let him know first when I got pregnant. Unfortunately, I never fulfilled that promise. Since my father's illness was discovered a year ago, I did everything I could to help. I visited him and the hospital regularly with my mother, and I called and video chatted often. But I still wonder if there was more I could have done. My mother tried to reassure me, saying I did well and that my father would have been satisfied. Just then, my sister Portia came home with a lawyer. The lawyer introduced himself as Samuel and handed me his business card. Portia said, "I heard from this lawyer that Dad left quite an inheritance." I replied, "It's not all for you, Portia. We don't get along well anymore, especially since Dad got sick." Her attitude and lack of visits only made things worse. I might have been harsh when I spoke to my sister, but I was worried about our father. Her reaction was also frustrating. She said, "I'm not being stubborn. It's hard to travel from the city to the countryside." I replied, "But you could drive here in 2 hours. It's not that far." She snapped back, "Those 2 hours are tough, and it costs money." When I said that money is important, she said, "Of course it is. I'm busy, so stop contacting me." Then she stopped talking. Despite her living far away, she could have visited once in a while. That's why our relationship became strained, especially since she never visited our father. Feeling the tension, the lawyer stepped in and said, "Let's calm down." I apologized, and the lawyer continued, "As I mentioned on the phone, I have your father's will." My mother asked when this happened, and the lawyer explained that a few weeks before he passed away, my father had contacted him. The lawyer had met with my father at the hospital, where the primary physician had arranged for him to contact the lawyer after my father passed away. The lawyer then took out a white envelope and placed it in front of us. I recognized my father's handwriting on the envelope. Portia, looking annoyed, said, "Just tell us what's in it. I'm busy." The lawyer opened the envelope, revealing a single piece of paper. It listed that besides the house and land, my father's inheritance included some savings and a storage shed. We knew about the house and land, but the storage shed was a surprise. Before I did think much about it, Portia angrily asked the lawyer, "What about the farm?" The farm my father worked on was something he did as a hobby. He used to run a company in the next town, but when he turned 50, he decided he wanted to retire and take it easy. I was in high school at the time, and my sister, who was in college, didn't like the idea. My mother and I were worried about my father's health, so we agreed with his decision to close the company. My father assured us that we had enough savings, so we didn't need to worry about the money. After that, he really did close his company and started farming near our home. He enjoyed it and said it felt good to stay active. Seeing him happy made me feel good about our decision, but my sister didn't feel the same. She said she would come back home after graduating from college, but instead, she stayed near her university for work and eventually married the CEO of an IT company. My sister now insists that the farm should be part of the inheritance. The lawyer looked over the documents and then found a note saying the farm was actually rented land. I was surprised because I thought we owned a large piece of land. My sister was disappointed, and while the farm was big and used to grow vegetables, it might be too much for us to handle. It might actually be better that the farm is rented since none of us know much about farming. We then moved on to discussing how to divide the inheritance. The lawyer explained that the house and land would go to our mother, and the remaining assets would be split between my sister and me. He said we could divide the rest as we wanted, including the savings and storage shed. I asked about the savings and was told it amounted to about $100,000, which wouldn't be subject to inheritance tax. My sister, sounding pleased, declared she would take the cash. I strongly disagreed, arguing that as the oldest daughter, I should have a fair share too. I insisted on the storage shed if she was so set on taking the cash. My sister then asked the lawyer for more details about the shed. The lawyer explained it was a small building about the size of a small bedroom and showed us photos. The shed looked like a rundown shack and contained only basic tools, nothing valuable. Seeing the photos, my sister grimaced and said she didn't want it. She conceded, "Fine, I'll take the cash. You can have that old shed." "Hold on, that's not fair," I said, feeling frustrated. My sister had agreed to the vegetable farming earlier, so why was she complaining now? It was hard to argue with her, but if I didn't speak up, she would take all of Dad's inheritance. "So we're good then?" my sister pressed me. I struggled to answer until my mother stepped in, saying, "As long as Portia won't complain later, I have no objections." Portia agreed. There's no way I would. So it was settled. Portia would get the cash, and I would get the shed. I felt uneasy and protested, "I'm not satisfied." Portia snapped back, "Oh, give it up. You're so greedy. You care more about Dad than money, right? Her words left me speechless. I knew family was more important than money, but I still felt unhappy about the arrangement. In the end, our mother bought the house and land, Portia got Dad's savings, and I was left with the shed. My sister signed a document promising not to complain about the division, and she laughed loudly, which only made me more upset. I complained to my mother. "Why didn't you help me?" she replied. "I did help you. I made sure you got the shed." I was not happy about it, but she said, "You might find something surprisingly good if you look closely." The next day, I took the key from the lawyer and walked to the shed. It was a 10-minute walk along a rural road. When I reached the shed, I found it dusty, probably because no one had cleaned it in a while. I hoped there might be something sentimental from Dad. I looked around but found nothing special, just dirty tools. I mumbled to myself that I should take what was inside for now. As I inspected the shed, I noticed it seemed smaller inside than it looked from the outside. Maybe it was the dim light, but it felt cramped. I stepped outside to see if something was off. Walking around to the back of the shed, which was next to a thicket of trees, I was surprised to find another door. I gasped. There was an entrance at the back that wasn't visible from inside the shed. From inside, it had seemed like there was only one door, so I wondered what was going on. It appeared there must be a hidden wall in between. When I realized there was a hidden space accessible only from the back, I got excited. This had to be Dad's surprise. He always loved surprises and had delighted me with them on my birthdays. Overwhelmed by memories, I felt tears well up. I quickly went back into the shed, hoping to find the key to this secret space. Dad would have hidden it somewhere in the shed, so I started searching with a gut feeling. After some searching, I found 2 keys hidden in the handle of a shovel. I went to the back door and tried one of the keys. It clicked open, and I discovered a cramped space, about 3 feet wide, with a large safe inside. I recognized the safe from Dad's office when I was a child. Nostalgic, I hugged it, feeling that this was a true memory of my father. It made the inheritance feel worthwhile, but knowing Dad, I suspected there might be more surprises. I inserted the second key into the safe, and with a slightly rusty sound, it opened. I was stunned by the contents inside, an unexpected inheritance. I quickly locked the safe and rushed to tell my mother. After explaining the situation, I called my husband for help, and together we moved the safe from my parents' house. I realized that the contents of the safe were definitely Dad's, but since they were part of my inheritance, I might need to pay inheritance tax. I needed to get this sorted out properly, so I consulted the lawyer. The lawyer advised me to speak with a certified public accountant, so I got a referral and left the complicated details to the accountant. A year passed, and just when I thought everything was settled, my sister showed up unexpectedly near my home. I was puzzled by her visit since we weren't close and hadn't seen each other much after Dad's passing. She seemed nervous and wanted to come inside, so I let her in and served coffee. Then she started asking strange questions. "Did you win the lottery or something?" she asked. "No, I didn't. Did your husband get a bonus?" I replied, confused. "I don't play the lottery, and my husband's bonus isn't due yet." "What are you talking about? Why do you ask about money?" I asked directly. My sister, now visibly frustrated, said, "You have money, don't you?" She explained that she had recently run into our aunt, who mentioned receiving a $500 gift card from me as a thank you for visiting Dad while he was sick. My sister assumed this meant I had come into some extra money and was interrogating me about it. I sighed, realizing what this was about. "It was just a thank you gift," I said. My sister was annoyed by my attitude and demanded to know where I got the money for it. I explained that it came from the inheritance and that I had sent thank you gifts to relatives who had helped us. My sister frowned and said, "All you got was that dirty shed." It sounds like the safe contained a significant inheritance that was unexpectedly valuable. I explained to my sister that the watches in the safe were collected by Dad as a hobby and were worth at least $500,000. Although the remaining savings were around $100,000, the true value was in those watches. I sought advice from the lawyer and was told that the inheritance tax would be based on the value of the watches. With such high-value items, I needed to pay inheritance tax, which I decided to handle by selling some of the watches. I used the proceeds from the sale to cover the tax and sent thank you gifts to relatives who had supported us, including the gift cards my sister had mentioned. I kept a few sentimental items, like the pocket watch Dad often wore. I showed it to my sister, explaining that it wasn't worth much but held significant emotional value for me. Despite this, my sister was visibly frustrated. "Why don't you have any left?" she asked. I explained that while I still had some watches, the safe was too large for my house and was stored at Mom's place. It was the same safe Dad used at his company, and its size made it impractical for me to keep at home. My sister seemed lost in thought and then suddenly stood up and said she was leaving. She knew where the money had come from and left without arguing. I was relieved she didn't make a fuss, but I still felt uneasy. Later that night, I received a panicked call from my mother, saying I needed to come over right away. My husband and I rushed to her house and saw red lights from police cars surrounding it. We pushed through the crowd to find out what was happening. My mother explained that after she went to bed around 9 p.m., she heard noises that sounded like someone was searching for something. She thought it was a burglar, and being alone in the house, she decided to escape through the window. She saw a flashlight moving inside and ran to the neighbor's house for help. The neighbor saw the flashlight and called the police, thinking it was a break-in. It turned out that the flashlight was from my sister, who had snuck into the house to search the safe after hearing about it. My mother and the neighbor didn't know this. When the police arrived, my sister panicked and tried to escape, even though it was her own family home. In her rush, she bumped into the open safe, which fell on top of her. She ended up trapped under it. She was taken to the hospital with a leg injury. I couldn't believe what had happened. I apologized to the police for the late-night call and also called my sister's husband to explain the situation. Wait, so Portia broke into her own family home and got hurt? Yes, that's right. What is Portia doing? She never even helps with housework. I'm really sorry about my sister. I've decided to file for divorce. According to Portia's husband, she had gotten into a lot of debt because she spent a lot on expensive things. He just found out and they had a big argument. Portia left the house, saying she would borrow money from Mom to pay off her debts. She had already used the $100,000 she inherited to pay off some of her debt, but it wasn't enough. That's why she came to me looking for more money. Learning about the safe's contents led to her actions and this whole mess. No wonder her husband was so angry. Now Portia, who fractured her leg, is in the hospital. Her husband came to the hospital and started talking about divorce. Naturally, Portia made a scene, saying she absolutely wouldn't get a divorce, but it was too late. Her husband had already brought the divorce papers. Seeing them, Portia had no choice but to sign. Now she's in her hospital bed, shocked. There's a part-time job magazine next to her, so she's probably planning to work part-time to pay off her debts. That would be a relief for me. As for me, I've decided to move back to my parents' home after all this chaos. I'm worried about my mother, but there's another reason. I found out I'm pregnant. My husband and I talked about it and decided to move back home so my mother can help us with the kids and childcare. I wish I could have told my father about the pregnancy while he was still alive, but I'm sure he would have been happy for us. I'm looking forward to having a healthy baby.